Report Committee to order for November 13th, 2018. Any public comments? There's not a lot of people here.
Can you ask that also at the end of this? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
Do I have to introduce myself?
Yes.
I'm Kelly Burkhardt. I'm at Hi. I'm at 29 Sugar Hill Drive, and I'm in Phase 2. So we're one of the first neighborhoods to get hit with the implementation of the wastewater system. So my concerns are specific engineers that are going out and collecting money right now and misrepresenting the timeline, telling people that they have 3 months to secure an engineer, that everyone after that will pretty much be unavailable. That's my concern. And my own research involved calling a couple of companies and asking them if that was true, and they said no, that it wasn't, that they were more than happy to address any of our concerns, that they are not in the business of procuring money for a project that is 3 years out, and that they will definitely be available. That's my concern.
Okay. Larry, do you want to comment on any of that as far as this timeline?
Good morning, Larry Ballantyne. I'm a Selectman liaison, but I live in Northeast. And we had the same presentation from the engineering company. I think our take was slightly different in that what they presented to us was the timeline that they get from the town. But they're, if you want to call it pressure, they offer to give the residents a discount if they signed on earlier so they could better organize their workforce. The idea being that if they know that one street is going to be sewered, they can organize that and do it in a better fashion. So they didn't pressure or make any, at least in our case, didn't pressure or make any statements that were outside of the town timeline that's published. And all neighborhoods are different. Our neighborhood probably was slightly different, and the pressure to get something done was coming more from my neighbors rather than the firm. Some of them are going to Florida in the winter. They wanted to get some activity, know where they were going, what their options were. So it wasn't as, I hear these comments around, but, and I was in all these meetings, but our experience wasn't quite the same.
Can I ask you to clarify, if you can, when you talk about the timeline, which I think is what she's getting at, when do certain people need to know or start to engage with somebody like Coastal Engineering?
Well, that's published in the town. They're supposed to have something set up next spring when they finally come through with the mains, and you get a letter from the town. This is talking about planning to help people decide. And it was driven more by personal factors, people leaving town, wanting to know it's being taken care of while they were gone, so they'd be prepared for next spring when they get the official notice from the town. So they weren't making any of this judgment on the timeline. That was set. Theirs was planning, as I said, offering a discount.
Yes, Peter.
You know what?
Oh, didn't see you. No, that's all right. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. I think we've done a pretty good job in this committee is saying time and time again that first flow before you can start using anybody's sewer system going to Chatham is June of 2021. And if the homeowners keep that in mind, that even if you today decided where your stub is going to be to go to your house, nothing's going to flow to Chatham until June of 2021 at the earliest, assumes everything goes well. So think about it, you get 2.5 years before you actually have to get to the point, and they all won't come on at once either. It'll get phased in as the connections are made. So there's definitely time to sit back and wait. If it were me, I would wait until the construction contracts are actually issued next spring, And then I'd start to think about, okay, what's my own timeline to getting this done? When I see a project plan, which is something this group, once we get it from the constructors, if you will want to make public, it should identify what streets are gonna be done when, and so then you would know. Right now, we have engineering firm, at least one, maybe it's several, running around saying, oh, you need to sign up with us, whatever. That's beyond our purview. We're not in the business of promoting the private, folks that have to do this, the private companies. But all we can do is keep reassuring everybody that first flow isn't gonna happen until June of 2021. And I personally, if I lived there and had to connect, I'd wait until these construction contracts are issued, and that one of the first things they need to do is put their program out, or their plan out that says, okay, here are the streets I'm gonna do in this sequence, and then the homeowners will know at least relatively what a time frame will be when they need to get, serious about connecting.
I would just reiterate what this committee has said before and what the Board of Selectmen has said. And, now it's in writing, it's in the handbook we put out and in the mini version. And of course, the steps are to determine you're in phase 2. And the second step is to determine where your stub will be located. And that's the, come on. But the thing is that Dan and Megan, Dan Pelletier, our water superintendent, and Megan, our health director, have committed to giving workshops in the spring. And that's printed also. So all I'm trying to say is there should be no ambiguity in the town's position. Our position is that you should determine the stub location. You can do that with the help of Dan and Megan. You can do that with your own knowledge. Or if you choose, you can hire a professional engineer to help you with that then. But, I mean, that's the way it is, and anybody who says anything different should be done is wrong.
Thank you. I think the town has done a really good job on getting information out there. I think what's happening is that some of the information is being manipulated for certain entities to take advantage of. And in saying that, I've called several other companies, and they have said that now is not the time to be taking any money for project that is going to be at least 3 years out, beginning. And so I talked to these companies. They were very humble. They said that they were not interested in pressuring people to sign up with them, that when the time comes, and they'll be available. They'll also give group discounts to neighborhoods that are of 5 or more. And these are local companies that have, the owners have been born and raised here and graduated from our high schools, as my husband and I are. So with that being said, I think it's, what's the word? I think it's just very disenchanting that some people feel the need to misrepresent what the town is putting out there for information for us. One thing that I see that's being grossly manipulated is that an engineer is needed for the homeowner to tell the town where their lateral is going to go. And I think that if there was some information out there that simply put it to the homeowner in a simple way, here's your frontage, here is what we're doing, and I understand that you've done that. But if people could understand that the lateral needs to come off of the main that's going to be done, and it's going to the people's property. You've said that, and I've read it in the literature. But if there's some way that you could just kind of put a timeline to that and say, this is the first step, you may or may not need an engineer for this simple decision. It's a very simple decision. If people could figure out their frontage, figure out that when the main line is going to be going into their road out in front of their house, their property, and then maybe give them a time period of when they need to submit their decision of where they would like that lateral to go to access their property. Because after that, really, I mean, after that's basically our first and only decision that we need to make for another 3 years maybe. Who knows how long the project is going to take, really. I mean, we've got a timeline of about 2 years. People are still tying into Chatham's wastewater system, and that was done in 2014, 2015? So that's 4 years out, and people are still tying in. So there really is no hurry, which is the message, and I mean, that was the dialogue that I had with several other companies, saying that they were not going to pressure anyone. They were not going to misrepresent the town in saying you have 3 months to procure an engineer, otherwise no one will be available because they'll all be too busy. This is what I'm being told in my neighborhood. This is what my fellow neighbors are being told. And it's a misrepresentation.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I see, I don't know if it's on our agenda or not, but I see this letter that I think it was passed around here. It's, I think, intended to go out to homeowners.
That already went out
did?
last Monday.
Okay, all right. Let's say maybe we could amend this or something, the next one we send out, to make sure we had first flow is in June 2021, and that the workshops with the board, with the health director and the water wastewater superintendent will be held next spring.
All right, now, Megan had looked at that, and she hadn't put anything down
Yeah, okay.
to that, but that's
I mean, every chance we get, I
Yeah.
think we should be reinforcing that.
all right. All right. Oh, go ahead. You're always on my blind side.
Just a thought, as we go on, based on Kelly's comments, you know, I wonder if we could ask Dan, maybe even if he could do a podcast or something on that specific stub location process. He's given, you know, many demonstrations of it, but that or some other computer method that might be helpful to people so that when it's March, they have something they can focus on just on stub location.
I have one more comment.
Yes, go
Madam
ahead.
Chair, if I could. I believe this evening you're reporting on our behalf, the annual report to the
Yes.
Board of Selectmen.
Mhm.
So maybe during your report, at the end of the report, you can say, hey, it's come to our attention, we've had input from the public that some engineering firms or an engineering firm, whatever, is, you know, going around, you know, trying to get solicit business, if you will. And our committee just wants to make it clear and make it known that, again, first flow is June 2021, and that these workshops will be held next spring, where between the health director and the water wastewater superintendent, they will be sitting down with individual homeowners to help them in the process of deciding where their stub would go.
That's an excellent idea.
Can I just suggest something? If you could put in there that is really the only decision that needs to be made between now and then. I understand it. I understand it. There's a lot of people, I guess I'm speaking on behalf of some of the people in my neighborhood. I had a meeting where Chris Clark and Mike came out to the house and answered a lot of our questions for us. Still, people were I don't know about confused, but just kind of not really sure about the timeline. And so, again, I'm going to stress the timeline and specifically what needs to be done by the homeowner. And it sounds as if there's only one thing that needs to be done between now and 2021. First
No,
flow.
excuse me, to back off of that, because at some point, you do need to have your connection designed.
Right.
So, and that has to be done before you hook up. So, you know, you have to look at the program plan as to, or project plan as to when they're actually gonna come to your street, for instance. And I don't know, pick a time, 3 or 4 months before they actually come to your street, you're gonna wanna know,
Exactly.
what do I have to dig up?
Exactly,
Yeah.
but not in the next 3 months.
Not in the next 3 months.
Exactly. All righty, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, any other comments?
I think I'm good.
All right. All right, let's move on to the approval of minutes for September 4th, 2018. And I wasn't here yet, so,
Chair, I'd move we approve the minutes for September 4th, 2018. You want to do them all at once?
yes, yeah, go ahead.
September 27th, 2018, October 3rd, 2018, October 25th, 2018, and October 30th, 2018, as presented.
Any comments?
Well, is there a second?
I second it.
What am I saying?
Call for a vote.
Oh, call for a
All
vote?
approve, all approve?
All approved?
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. All right. All right, next on the,
Now we're up to date again.
Yes,
so you can
good.
say that tonight.
next on our agenda is a presentation by Heinz Proft, who's the Director of our Natural Resources, and he's going to do a
Thank you, sir.
presentation on what he does and how we use it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good morning. Heinz Proft, Harwich Natural Resources Director. About a month ago, one of these meetings, there was the idea of kind of giving an update on our water sampling program and then how that tied in here with the CWMP that came about and the overall monitoring. And someone had already asked as well to give an update on the Hinckley's phosphorus project. So I can do that at the end. And if at any time this gets long-winded, you can grab the shepherd's hook and we can move along. But some of this that I put together, I just kind of put a little bullet sheet because I'll cover this as I go about. You know, when we think of water sampling within the town of Harwich, it's quite a broad-based topic. It's quite big and what we've done for a lot of years. And some of this may come as a surprise, some of it might be more of a summary, but you know, when I was hired in 1998, there was a committee, just as committees have changed over the time, and it was called the Shellfish and Marine Water Quality Committee, and it existed until 2009. And that committee dealt a lot with our aquaculture, a lot with the water sampling as it was based upon opening and closures of shellfish areas. And at that time, there was also a town-wide water quality management task force, and I had very little interaction with that at that time. Frank Sansman later became a chairman. Larry Ballantyne was a member. Often we referred to it as the Harwich Water Quality Task Force. Initially, the only water sampling that I was a part of and aware of was something I would do on my own. I'd respond to a bloom, let's say it's Skinnicket Pond, or something at Long Pond, a fish kill. But we didn't have any kind of structure the way we think of it as present day. And the way that came about was through some more attention, effort, time, and money. And that was, you know, in the late 90s. I added the bullet point about Long Pond only because it kind of ties in later on to Hinckley's, but the Cape Cod Commission had a water quality staff and looked at the phosphorus levels at Long Pond in '99. And then 2 years later, there was a statement in a town report that said Long Pond may get an alum treatment. And then 2006, they had yet to finalize Long Pond alum treatment, and eventually it was done with the towns of Brewster and Harwich together. But that just gives an indication how much time it takes to wrap your mind around certain projects and get things in line and funds, and if it's multiple towns, it can take longer than someone coming up with an idea and approval one day and having it done a week later and have it completed. It was 2001 when, through the Water Quality Task Force at the time, myself, really, with the help of the town, we got funds to acquire water sampling equipment, which does cost money, and train volunteers in the town. They came out, and some of them are still with us today, to sample our estuaries. So this would be the embayments like Witchmere Harbor, Allen Harbor, Saquatucket, Herring River's a river, and then 11 ponds. And we based it upon the Pleasant Bay Alliance program, which was already taking place in the saltwater body of Pleasant Bay. The equipment, the procedures, the protocols. But basically, I enveloped that into our program and immediately began saltwater and freshwater sampling, thanks to the volunteers of the town of Harwich that came out, willing to get trained, do all the equipment, and go out. So in a sense, I could be in 11 spots at once. And that data then became our baseline for the archive database that then in 2004 became part of the Massachusetts Estuaries Project Partnership. They called it MEP at the time. and it was for nitrogen management. And this was done with UMass Dartmouth, and SMAS stands for School for Marine Science and Technology, and their wastewater management program. So they took our original database and then continued to add the data that we kept collecting in the town of Harwich. So that in 2009, the Water Quality Task Force and the town began working with CDM Smith. It was CDM originally then. And CDM was hired to help us with these nitrogen loading reports that were coming from our embayments and create an integrated water quality program. And so we developed our comprehensive wastewater management plan. So to answer that first question, how was the database used in CWMP? All that water quality data that had been collected all those years, you know, we think of monitoring an area, whether it be saltwater, freshwater. You know, if you have a summer or a winter or a season that you have a high or low number, it's nice, but can't really talk much more about that. I feel more comfortable with, you know, 3 years plus data. 5 years is excellent. Well, now we have a decade, and we certainly had a lot of data going into the creation of that CWMP, which saved the town some time, money, and effort at the time. And why, in a sense, why we're further along than some towns in terms of its acquisition of data, long-term data that can be used to develop a program. Pleasant Bay Alliance had been in existence, and Chatham had their, you know, pond watchers and things, and Falmouth had in Buzzards Bay, but it's a catch-22. There's a lot more time, money, and energy put into water sampling within the Cape, which is great. There's a lot of data, but that data gets flushed through primarily to UMass Dartmouth. So to give you an indication, the water quality data that we collected this summer, June, July, August, those results come back to me in April of the following spring, because that's how much data gets dropped off at UMass Dartmouth in these hallways of coolers, which they need to analyze and do quality assurance and duplicates, and then compare it to past year's data. So that there's a little bit of lag there. So the wastewater management plan that CWMP was finally finalized, and then there were these committees of, there was the support committee, there was a financial branch at one point to look at the cost analysis of that. So the wastewater committee then, at a certain point, has now evolved to this implementation committee. So there are these changes. There's a little thread throughout, and there are people who've been a part of it all, which is good, because it needs to be kind of carried forward so you're not starting from scratch each time when you address one of these issues. Present day water quality monitoring takes place in the form of coliform data, which is collected in our embayments and things. It's related to some of the shellfish opening and closures. Our health department does some coliform testing. It's indication of the water quality itself. I mean, there are coliform bacteria in your intestine already, so it's just an indication. But to put something into scale, an area will be closed for shellfishing when it exceeds 14 units per 100 milliliters. Just think of the number 14. But it's plenty safe for swimming. It has to exceed 100 to close it for swimming. So you can see how sensitive a shellfish area is, because they're filter feeding out what's in the water, and eventually they could be consumed. And so there's coliform data that gets collected by me through our water sampling program this summer. Division B Fisheries does that in the winter months. There's the water quality sampling program I mentioned, which we collect water from our harbors and our embayments and our river. We're part of the Pleasant Bay Alliance program, where I manage 4 stations, which is part of the Grand Pleasant Bay Alliance. It includes Round Cove and places within Pleasant Bay that are in Harwich waters. The golf course has begun taking samples the last couple years on some of their irrigation ponds, but that's through bottles and equipment that I give them, and I collect that data and submit that for analysis. I'm also collecting water samples for the coastal zone studies for contaminants of emerging concern. So these are things in our waterways that are detected in our rivers and embayments, and these are things like fire retardants or medicines that are put in septic systems, and things that people are ingesting medically, but the bodies aren't completely breaking them down, and they end up in our system. So it sounds somewhat scary, but really it is. We're able to detect them now, and now they're determining at what level is it too high. There were years ago when we couldn't detect them at these fine levels, but now we have that. So there's a lot of water sampling that takes place. So that's what I meant early on, is just kind of statement that, oh, we're collecting water samples, but how and where and why is done by a lot of different entities. I have either connections directly with a lot of them, or I'm doing it myself. To answer the second part of that question, it says how is it the monitoring will be important as the wastewater phases are implemented. this project, this very large, extensive costs, over many years, will ultimately come down to the monitoring that's done. These plans that are being put in place are based upon models that were put together, presented in a wastewater management plan, approved, and then these phases that the town is going to do, ultimately that kind of litmus test is it working, will come down to the monitoring, the actual TMDLs, total maximum daily loads, of nitrogen in Pleasant Bay and Witchmere and Saquatucket and Harwich waters. And so that's why we have these 8 phases, and we've often used the word of adaptive management as it's been presented, or how far along do we need to implement everything? If you had all the money and you could snap your fingers, I don't know if you'd want to do it all in 1 week anyway, because depending on how these phases are implemented and how it's working with Chatham and how the towns of Harwich and Dennis are working on the west side of Harwich, as things get put in, as these sewers get put in, and as these embayments start to affect the positive results of that, which should take place, the monitoring is critical for that, because that tells you how much you've done and how far you've come along, and perhaps how much more you need to do, either on a voluntary basis if you've met those limits, or you haven't quite met them. You're going to have to be forced to expand upon that program and treat more water. So how that actually, I visualize how that is done. I don't have a sense of how many people are involved, how much sampling is involved. It'll probably be based upon what we currently have with some other levels, or maybe more samples than we're taking, maybe more on a year-round basis. I don't know how that will be done, but it's going to take some time. It'll take some people power and some money as well. So that is kind of a history of water sampling within the town, the CWMP, how it was created, the data that was used to create that CWMP, and then, my input as to how that monitoring is really important and critical to the phasing or implementation of
I had a
CWMP.
question regarding Muddy Creek.
Yes.
Which is like
Yeah,
one of the things that was done, did it finish last year?
2 years.
Yeah. And that is part of the CWMP.
It is.
All right. I'm going to get a little bit more specific to maybe help people understand this,
Yep.
including myself. So now that that's finished, how often do you have to sample that?
Yeah.
All right, and where does that, when I say where does it go? After it's been analyzed, is that submitted to Cape Cod Commission?
Yeah. The way I am aware of the Muddy Creek project after it was completed, thinking that culvert expanded, the flushing that takes place there, the Pleasant Bay Alliance has taken that on. They had a station originally. I think they've added a second one up Muddy Creek to collect data in there. There's also current data being collected, not just water, but it's the flora that's changed because it's now more of a saltwater regime. The other day was there. It's not through natural resources. It's done, I don't know if it was coastal studies, but there were some scientists that came there, and you can see them running transects, and they're looking at not just the water quality, but everything that can change up in Muddy Creek. There's also, not pressure, but there's some focus now as a possible shellfishing area. Division of Fisheries is taking water samples there, and to create an area which they determine as conditionally seasonally approved, meaning some of the time it's open, some of it it's closed, kind of like many of our areas in Harwich. They have to take data in dry weather and wet weather and cold weather. They have to get all the parameters so they can feel confident opening and closing the area where people would then possibly consume shellfish of an area. So that data is also being collected. But the original question you had, I don't know where that stands or where that gets funneled to.
All right, then I got a question, and I could be wrong on this, but my understanding of reading the decision
Yeah.
that came in from Cape Cod to Harwich as to what they needed to do, one of the things they brought up was that with that monitoring of
Muddy Creek?
all the,
Oh,
in
oh,
Muddy
oh,
Creek,
okay,
but
yeah.
anything that we change,
Yeah.
we have to show what the difference or the improvement between what it was before and after we make the improvement, whether it be Muddy Creek, whether it's soaring, what the differences is in the nitrogen. All right, I got the impression that we as Harwich, all right, since this was part of our CWMP, that we needed to report that to Cape Cod Commission. Am I understanding then that this, I'm going to say Muddy Creek for right now, is being done by the Pleasant Bay Alliance and they report it?
I know that Pleasant Bay Alliance takes water samples in Muddy Creek. I also know that there is a sampling component within Muddy Creek that is outside of natural resources, it's outside of Pleasant Bay Alliance, because there are scientists in there collecting data up and down Muddy Creek. I don't know exactly what they're collecting or where that goes.
And you said outside of Pleasant Bay, meaning the
Meaning
Pleasant Bay
outside the
Alliance?
Pleasant Bay Alliance.
So who's actually doing that collection?
That I don't know.
Okay, because my impression was that we as the town need to be reporting that. So I guess my question would be, is if Pleasant Bay Alliance isn't doing it, and you're not doing it, and we know that a group is,
Yeah.
how are we getting that information that then goes to Cape Cod
Right.
Commission to say, yes, we did this?
Right, and I was under the impression, once there's actual flow of water to Chatham, and you're treating
Right.
septic system, then you would start seeing a difference in the Pleasant Bay portion of Pleasant Bay, and that's where your percentage removal is required, and that's what you're
But aren't we
gauging.
also looking at, because
Muddy
Muddy
Creek
Creek
will help
was
that.
right. So I guess my thought was that we needed to be monitoring how Muddy Creek was or is contributing to the reduction of nitrogen. Maybe not the final.
Correct.
But is it changing, and who's on, because it seemed like we were supposed to have a program that outlined what our monitoring program or.
Right, but I
is.
never saw the, ABCs of that. I think that if you say we have a station outside where Muddy Creek enters in Pleasant Bay, we've always had a station there. We're collecting data on nitrogen, phosphorus, and chlorophyll, and phosphorus. That has a history, and it's continuing today. We have that data. We had it from this summer. We'll get it in the spring.
And does Pleasant Bay have that, or do you have it, or who?
Well, when-
Oh, all right, he's got his hand up back there, go ahead.
I wanted to make another comment, but right now, as Heinz inferred, all the data that Pleasant Bay collects, and they have at least one, I think 2 stations in Muddy Creek, gets submitted to the Cape Cod Commission. And so we can tie into that. You're right. Part of our requirement is to report that as well, but we can refer our reporting to the data that's been submitted to the Cape Cod Commission.
All right,
Our
but you're
data
saying-
goes.
But you're
wait,
saying
let
we
me-
refer it.
Right, because they'll have it. Well, I want to stand up and actually just to, one, compliment Heinz and the work he's done to pull all this together. It's fantastic. It's more work than we realize getting this data. But the second thing is that the Cape Cod Commission and the Wastewater Collaborative have attained a grant for this year and I think they'll start pretty soon, putting together a single database for all of the Cape. One of the frustrations that we have going forward now is that Harwich has because of work at Heinz mentioned, has an extensive database, water database, both on our abatements and on our ponds that goes. But and each town is doing this, some better, some worse, but we don't have a common database to look at that and also do some statistical analyses of what it means, is nitrogen increasing, decreasing. And that's been an issue that's been discussed for several years, and they finally have funding. Presumably we'll have I think it's the matching funds. The county has come up with some matching funds. But the goal is to put that all into one database that's online that we can all look at our sources. Mm-hmm. And then these type of questions you're asking, Sharon, will be very visible. We can state that. And so that's a step forward, but that will complement what Heinz is saying is going on now.
One quick question. And again, this could be my interpretation of that decision, but that we were supposed to be submitting some sort of a plan or whatever you want to call it, of how we were doing that monitoring, how often it was being done.
Right.
That type of thing.
And that's true. I mean, we still have to do that.
All right, okay. Yes.
So I think the near-term question is, I think, we invested in Muddy Creek, right? Doing the opening up of opening up the channel and whatnot, and the bridge, all that. And the concept was that we're gonna get increased flushing coming in and out, and we're gonna, in theory, I forget the number, but we're gonna save not having to sewer a couple hundred houses, right? And I understand there's some lag time between when you do something and when you see the results. So I guess the question is, how do we know if the thing did if that effort made any improvement in the situation? I don't know the answer to that, but
Well, to start out, I think you can look at it at minimum 3 years from the time it was built. So we're approaching 2, year 3, then you've got 3 years of data in Pleasant Bay. Maybe 5 is where you say, well, 3 you could see maybe a trend, but, I mean,
Right, you're not going to see the final.
but, in terms of flushing and if just the closed side of Muddy Creek then becomes conditionally approved shell fishing, that's a plus, which it never had for 80 years. And, anecdotally, people are either digging up and shellfish in the flat, but what the overall Pleasant Bay looks like there are many more stations than just outside Muddy Creek into Pleasant Bay. There's probably 5 or 6 in that Pleasant Bay Alliance. So after 3 years, you look at that and say, all right, we have 11 or 12 prior to the culvert, and now we've got 3 since the culvert, and compare that. Because you have rainy summers and all this other stuff.
And then I just point out that, in the sewer project for Phase 2,
Yeah.
we're talking about June 2021
Yeah.
for first flow. It's probably gonna be, just because of the latent
Yeah,
getting through the ground, it's probably gonna be 2025 until we actually
I think
see
so.
positive results from that, I'm
Right.
guessing.
no, you're absolutely right. And if you think of it, you can use that same argument or position as to how did the bay get to the condition it was at? It wasn't house was built and the bay turned, it was as housing was built and at that latent time of the flow and through the groundwater that the problem then became. So as towns started to address it, actually the problem was still getting worse as they were addressing it because we
Yeah.
still haven't had the full effect of all that build out and all the roads that were in the impervious surfaces. And now, right in that neutral ground, kind of shifting back, it's like turning an aircraft carrier around. You're gonna take time, years to get this to go. But you're right, that first pipe goes in.
Oh, yeah.
Someone's gonna run down to Pleasant Bay and look out there and say, well, I don't see a difference. a
So
week
how
later.
often do you, or whoever does the collecting for Muddy Creek, how often in a year are those samples collected? And like when? Do you do it 4 times a year, the 4 seasons, you do it twice?
Yeah, because it's a new one, they may have, I say the fall, like the April, October, November timeframe, but the Pleasant Bay Alliance and Harwich Water Sampling Program, because of the time and the years that we've had data, we've been able to save money and actually focus on, quote, the worst conditions, which are gonna be your June, July, August timeframe.
Okay.
That's when, if you have a good water sample in that month or that summertime, you're doing fine. If you have some days that aren't that great, that gives you an indication that there's an issue out in these bodies of water. We used to collect May and October, but now it's June, July, August for those. Muddy Creek being a new one, I'd have, Bob Duncanson might know that, if they take some earlier in the season, or like, do you have some information
No,
on it?
he would know.
He would know if it's on the taking more samples initially, like
Oh, all right.
earlier in the season. I doubt there are very few January samples taken.
All
The
right.
water quality would be excellent, it's cold, the coliform isn't growing, you'd be like, wow, this is great, why isn't it like this in the summer? Yeah. So
All right.
it's more of a money thing at that point.
So Madam
Okay.
Chair, it might be appropriate if we have Carol Ridley come in, who runs the Pleasant Bay Alliance, come in one of our sessions.
that'd be good.
Put her on the
Yeah, that's a
agenda
great
and
idea.
find out what they're doing in that area, so we can
Because
get
what I'm
things
trying to figure
coordinated.
out is once we eventually start looking at that decision and what our requirements for reporting are for Harwich, all right, what Pleasant Bay has done,
Yep.
how that fits into our program, and I guess I'm not clear whether it has to be reported by Harwich, even though the information's coming from Pleasant Bay, or is what Pleasant Bay provides to Cape Cod Commission sufficient for all the towns? I don't know how that works.
Right, that Pleasant Bay Alliance incorporates more than Harwich
Yes,
Chatham.
yes.
So, and the commission looks at it as by embayment. Yeah, if there's an embayment within a town, you have one person to talk to, but they're concerned about the nitrogen levels in an embayment. So when they address Pleasant Bay, even Muddy Creek is shared, they're gonna ask Chatham and Harwich, or, they'll ask the 4 towns that are involved in Pleasant Bay, why is that nitrogen level not at the level that we requested years ago?
So, hi, I have a few questions for Heinz. My questions would be, the accuracy of these samples. It seems like it's getting collected from several different pieces. And then, what is the shelf life? What is, how are they stored?
Yep.
What's the transportation time between the storage of them to the point of getting to the lab?
Yep.
Where is the lab?
Yep.
It's in Dartmouth?
Yep.
Okay, is there any way that we could have something more local that would do the testing
So,
and save money there?
yeah, they're good questions. In terms of the quality control, the QA/QP of the water sampling program, the sophisticated instrumentation that we use, and then the protocols have been approved. The Pleasant Bay Alliance program, which is ours, is identical to that in terms of the day of water sampling. People are collecting these samples. There are different colored bottles, light bottles and dark bottles. Dark bottles collect water that sun can't affect the chlorophyll in there. Those bottles are put in coolers with ice. They're brought within, an hour sampling to the harbor. Then it's collected in large coolers and driven to SMAS. So from the time it's sampled, it's at the door of UMass Dartmouth in less than 3 hours. So the instrumentation, the protocols are identical in terms of Pleasant Bay Alliance and Harwich water sampling, freshwater and saltwater, the training of the volunteers, the equipment, the data sheets. Once it gets to SMAS, they can preserve what they need to do. They put them in their freezers or coolers, and then we'll begin. Oh, there's also a filtering that takes place for some of the analysis on site, meaning we do that at the harbor within 30 minutes of sampling or at the location. Pleasant Bay Alliance does the same. So the quality of the data is good. The instrumentation is what the equipment being used is at UMass Dartmouth. Center for Coastal Studies has some, but they can't take the volume which all these towns and the number of samples that we deliver. We deliver 18 plus 20 some, 30 some samples on one. And when I say a sample, like a Witchmere sample might be a surface combination of light and dark bottle and a bottom sample of light and dark bottle. That's 4 bottles plus 2 smaller bottles each sample. So there's 6 bottles right there that's delivered just for that Witchmere sample one day. But again, the protocols have been proven and sanctioned. The analysis, the equipment, we certainly don't have, and there's no one that does it at that level. And going back to the Massachusetts Estuaries Program, looking at southeastern Mass in terms of its nitrogen loading for all their reports, that's the School for Marine Science and Technology, UMass Dartmouth. We often use the word Brian House in that program, but they're that massive collection of that they've gotten money from state to do that. So in a sense, it's also cost effective to us for what we get charged for our samples. So we've been in there a long time, and not that we're grandfathered, but our cost per sample is below if you were starting a brand new program with a new lab, and you'd have to get data transferred over. So we're doing it the most cost effective and shortest distance. So it's about an hour's drive for a volunteer to deliver the samples on the morning of the sampling.
It has to be a volunteer?
It doesn't have to be a volunteer, but I often ask for drivers, and I set them up, and they come to Saquatucket and grab the coolers, and the town does reimburse them for mileage from there and back. But the water sampling collection is done by volunteers because it's a lot to do, and often in the ponds, it's somebody who lives near the pond or someone that's been trained to go out into Witchmere, Saquatucket, or Allen Harbor. And some of these volunteers are still the original ones that have been doing it for almost 20 years, and I tip my cap to the amount of help that I've gotten. Some of these presentations and some of the summaries, it's just what people have done to help me or help natural resources, and I get a lot of credit sometimes for things that I really personally didn't do. I certainly had a hand in it, but I've lost a couple ponds from time to time, and I then will drum up more volunteers. That's the negative part of it. They're all, no one's being paid, no one's required to do it. They have things that come up maybe the day before and can't sample, and so we lose some sampling dates and times. But again, we've sampled 4 or 5 times a summer now for 20 years. There's a lot of data in there. So if we have, fortunately, one day that we miss, or if it's a weather day because it's tide dependent, we're good. And so is Pleasant Bay Alliance with their history. But those are good questions.
Thank you. Is it a possibility that down the line, the wastewater treatment facility in Chatham could entertain our samples? And process them?
I don't know what equipment they have to do things that we collect out in from the harbors and ponds, meaning chlorophyll. I don't know if a wastewater treatment plant set up to do what we're collecting in terms of other stuff, but that's a thought also, is how much more sampling are we going to do? Do we get some more secure sampling protocol, manager assistance, something like that? I don't know.
Okay.
Can I just make a comment on this? Is that the county spending, I think, $200,000 this past year to to buy the proper equipment to do the testing at the county to shorten the distance, and they feel that they have a lab, but they've let it go, what's the proper term? Not work, go derelict, that's a good term. This is on TV, unfortunately. And so they're re-upping the mass spec to do some of the emerging contaminants will also be a concern. And they, a couple years ago, they hired a new director for the lab. So the hope is, because monitoring is becoming such a critical activity, that to pull that closer to home. But it is an expensive project to buy the equipment to do it. But they bought the equipment. Now they're trying to figure out, analytically, some of this gets much more complicated in saltwater than it does in freshwater. So right now they can do a lot of work on freshwater that they need some tweaks, modifications. But that was one of the top agenda items of Leo. I think it will continue on, but that may help the local, make it quicker and get the local people involved.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
are we talking to Barnstable County Lab at the,
At the
courthouse?
jailhouse.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That's closer.
We keep them locked up at that year.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes.
And at just times, I believe that Harwich isn't unique in the fact that volunteers are doing water sampling.
Yeah.
Collecting the samples, I know there's, a team in Chatham, there's a
Yep.
team all over the place. That are trained to go out and do this, so it's very common.
very
that
common. In
volunteers
fact,
are doing this.
Not only is it common, I've had towns reach out to me over the years, say, how do you start it? How do you keep them going? How do you go about drawing people? How do you train them? That kind. Because we've been successful, but also we've done it for so many years. I've had phone calls to initialize small, how to get that equipment, and I've helped towns start. You can't do it all at once, and you don't do all your ponds in 1 year, and you don't get all the equipment in 1 year, and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's very common in towns, and I think that's a good thing. It's not because it's a cost-saving measure, which it is. It gets vested interest, because those people are the same ones that come to meetings. They eventually vote. There's these terms that we kind of throw around eventually, like TMDL and watershed and estuary, which if someone is not involved in water sampling, when they hear the word nitrogen or bloom or that's not brand new to everyone. So I think it's a great.
Right. Any other questions for Heinz?
Outstanding.
Did you
Oh,
want me to address
wanna-
the Hinkley's at all? That's fairly
Yes,
quick.
yes,
All right,
I was just gonna cover that
Okay,
part first.
sure.
Go ahead.
So I added a little section at the bottom, a little bit of history there. Over time, Hinkley's experienced these episodic type algal blooms, which led to a study that the town put forth, and it was $30,000 at the time. And in 2011, then the 2000 report recommended that the town look at an alum treatment. And then to attempt to get funding for that, the town, or me, went in front of the CPC 3 different times and finally got approved in May to address Hinkley's Pond and have this phosphorus inactivation treatment, the alum treatment. And in June 2018, went out and collected the most current samples. Benthic just means the bottom, so the current phosphorus concentration, so that the correct dosage would then be approved and calculated for the project. August 2018, I began to write a draft form of an RFP. I worked with the town engineer, I worked with the town administrator, assistant town administrator, conservation agent to put that together. And then I've had to go in front of the Conservation Committee to look at some of the approvals and permitting. There's some outside of the town permitting approval that has to take place. Some of these can take 30 days and plus. So the treatment for Hinkley's will take place. We just don't have a date yet. We were targeting this late fall, like this time frame, or even into December. It's based upon a couple things. We would like to do it when the water is warmer than 40 degrees, which we're kind of running out of, and to avoid the April herring run. But we have to have all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted so that it's a full legal bid with everything in order. So some of these reviews can take 30 days, like this heritage endangered species thing that I sent off probably 10 days ago with the help of the conservation agent. So they can take up to 30 days. So now we're looking at, that we, the town, is by January having all that in place, putting the RFP out there, and getting an accepted offer to treat the pond. This is just conjecture now. It could take place maybe June, like after the herring run, or may even go into early next fall, so when there's less activity on the pond. but it still is then completed, it's still done with, you know, all the permits in order. I've gone back in front of Conservation Commission, I've answered questions about, you know, the treatment of alum and how valid that is, and, you know, I gave a presentation, and one of the comments is alum has been used in drinking reservoirs. Hinckley's not even a drinking reservoir, so the sense that when people hear the word dosage or treatment or chemical, it kind of brings up certain images, but it's not a just haphazard treatment of alum. It's a licensed company that has followed procedures which we have within the bid, within that certain dosage that we've now requiring, not too much, but it's enough to address that issue there. So the town is progressing, we're on track. I was hopeful that we would do it before, you know, Christmas, but I don't think that's gonna happen.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to go back to the CWMP.
Yeah.
All right, part of that was also clearing up these freshwater ponds,
Right,
all right? So when this finally happens,
yeah.
will there be something written up that's then submitted to Cape Cod Commission?
If they ask for it.
I thought,
You know, this initially was this, you know, integrated water quality program, which then kind of shifted comprehensive wastewater management plan, which addresses, yeah, nitrogen, but also some of our ponds in there. Hinckley's being the largest pond, it's impacted. So we currently sample Hinckley's pond. They'll be monitoring while the treatment takes place, and afterwards, I certainly see Hinckley's pond continuing in our water sampling program, but I also see benthic samples taken from the bottom of Hinckley's pond after treatment, say, okay, where are we now? We have, you know, samples prior to it, 2011, we have samples from 2018, benthic samples, and we'll treat it again after so let's say it's either in the summer, if it's treated June, or next fall after the treatment, because it's a chemical reaction that takes place immediately. So we should be able to see it, you know, it's not like a sewer, which there's a latent, no, it's immediate, it's an reaction. And then that data will be available, and if somebody asks for it, we can provide it for them, but I don't.
all right, now I got another question along those same lines. All right, so you treat it with alum and it works.
Yeah.
All right. What do we show? In other words, if we let it go, it's going to come back again. So what does the CWMP, what are we doing that will help to alleviate this from going back to where it was, so that
Right.
every time this happens, we don't have to go through this process of an RFP, getting the
Sure.
town to agree to
Yep.
go ahead and treat it with alum again?
Well, even from the onset, it was never a one-time forever solution.
Right.
It's, now, 20 years is a long time. I've seen 15 to 25, I've used 20. There are things the town can do to extend the life of that treatment, which is some of the runoff that's around Hinckley's Pond, setbacks of septics that are within
All
a
right, I was
certain
just going to say,
that kind of stuff.
is the sewering
The
that's
sewer.
going to be done,
Yep.
is that going to impact these ponds, the freshwater ponds? What we have in place right now, let's say for phase 2 or even moving out, I mean, we've got a 40-year
Timeframe for the.
timeframe for this. So will theoretically, the sewering that will be done
Yep.
over time actually affect
Yeah,
the
my answer to
salt-
that is
the
if it's in
freshwater
that
ponds?
watershed. I don't see a sewer pipe in East Harwich and Pleasant Bay affecting Hinckley's at all, positive or negative.
All right.
Because it has to be within that, I don't know what phase or where it looks on the chart and when year that comes in. But any sewering that takes place does impact positively the watershed that it's within. So that,
All right, all right,
There's,
go ahead.
there's no sewering to be done that will affect Hinckley's, other
Okay.
than, I'm not quite sure about the 124 strip itself.
right.
It seems, and the Long Pond area, I don't know off the top of my head, but it seems the only effect we could have on Hinckley's would be improvement of the water basins, the storm water that's running in from Route 124.
Right, and also Cape Cod Tech was doing something within their flow that was in the past affecting Hinckley's to either the road or the runoff or that.
They may be.
There was something going on.
So the stormwater program might help.
Oh, sure, yeah, stormwater runoff.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks. And, but the treatment, I mean, what you run into in Hinckley's and Long
Yeah.
Pond is phosphorus, not
It's
nitrogen.
not
Yes.
You're not trying to
Yes.
solve nitrogen
No.
issues
No.
there. But I will point out, when did we do Long Pond? That's,
2009?
yeah, a while ago.
Right.
And that's the biggest pond on
Right.
the Cape.
And it's still
Still
And
in
it was
good
done
shape.
and without any incident, as far as I know.
Correct, yep. And we're
was,
10 years in.
You know, very successful,
All
and
right.
it's much larger than Hinkley's Pond.
Yeah,
so-
much
Right.
larger. And we haven't had any fish kills since that. I answered some questions about that to the, you know, what's happening around, well, we haven't had any fish kills. Water quality is swimmable. The herring are still migrating to Long Pond, and so, yeah, that was
All right.
effective in that sense. And I would say Hinkley's will feel that immediately after the treatment.
Okay, there's a question?
Please, I hate to give you more work to do, because it sounds like you're doing the work of about 3 people. I would be interested in, maybe, I don't know, knowing, maybe you already have it, are goals outlined for each of these areas? And then with the goals, some type of protocols that when certain levels are reached, that you get an automatic approval for treatment? And then money allocated for
Sure.
that?
The CWMP, the big comprehensive wastewater management plan, has, well, not just the phases, but it talks about, when you say goals, it's really the percentage goal of removal of nitrogen. So it has that in a depicted form. Some areas need more than others, so the goal really is a percentage of the nitrogen removal. The phosphorus in the ponds, that is based upon just the current level that was there and what we hope to see decrease after the treatment of alum. And there's the continuing monitoring in both the saltwater and freshwater areas that will continue to take place. So I don't know if it's in the executive summary, so I don't have to read all the CWP. It's pretty big, but it gives time frame, but also the goals that they mean to address. And circling back to freshwater, they also talk about some other ponds besides Hinkley's in there. Great Sand Lakes is in there. There's another one I can't think of right now, but that they suggest that Sheep's Pond, which is North Hinkley's, would be another one. You know, that it's like their target list in order. It doesn't have specific dates. It just has what would be next, because you never know how long it'll take to finish up one project. But come down to my office. I'll show you everything I got at Saquatucket, and we'll spend some time.
Where's your office?
Down at Saquatucket Harbor.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can review any reports or data, or we can talk.
I'd be interested in volunteering. I can collect samples
Oh,
down at Muddy Creek, because I live
okay.
right there.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Great. It's worth coming.
Another volunteer.
All right, anyone else? Questions, comments?
Thank you, guys.
All right,
Yeah, thank you.
thanks, Heinz.
Thank you, Heinz.
Okay, let me just, all right, the next topic for discussion, I shouldn't say discussion, a topic for discussion, Larry Ballantyne, and we're going to be talking about a project manager discussion on what we might be looking for.
If you want to sit, Larry.
Do I want, no, I'm fine, I'm sitting too long.
He doesn't want,
I-
he's
I
hoping not
just,
to be there that long.
I was just commenting to Heinz that there was and I didn't know what the acronym was, a PALS program going on for a number of years, which is what Ponds and Lakes database that we shipped our data again to the county, and they kept that database going. And then that was sort of, I think we lost interest in that, or the county lost interest in that with all the CWMP emphasis on the saltwater abatements. And as part of this data program that I mentioned, they want to bring that back, so we'll have a single database for all the pond data, which will help answer your questions. I would also comment on the Long Pond, just follow up what Heinz said, but on the Long Pond permit that we got from to do the alum treatment, part of that requirement was that we, each of the towns involved, in this case it was Harwich and Brewster, take steps to minimize potential phosphorus transfer erosion to the pond. And, you know, the state also, for instance, you don't find phosphorus in fertilizers anymore. You don't find it in laundry soap. But each conservation commission has also taken a tougher stance on, you know, being sure they enforce the distance between septic tanks, septic systems in the pond. So there have been taken steps, and that was required. And I presume that, we'll get a Hinkley's permit, and if that assumption is right, I'm sure they'll also have the same requirements that the towns take steps to minimize future phosphorus input into the pond. Because that's the key, once you, in any case. Just to follow up on that. We've been talking in this committee, I know Noreen's been and others, about project management for our CWMP. And we've talked about that as a selectman, as the Board of Selectmen for some time. And it never really got a lot of positive reinforcement in that. Not because there was a disagreement with the purpose, but rather they felt it was somewhat costly to do so. Now the selectmen have come back and as a group have said, this is something we want to consider. We want to look at a project manager. Because, this is, so far we've spent $30 million. This is a big project, not to have a single manager looking after all the different aspects of it. And so, as you know, for me talking, I've gone from project manager, I then proposed a communication coordinator, which we couldn't, and it probably wasn't written in as much detail as it should have been, but we didn't get a proper response for that. So now I want to come back and discuss what the project management should look like. What I'd like to do is, and I'll go through this in a minute, but just sequentially, if you can discuss the dot points that I've given you and come up with some recommendations. It's on the agenda tonight at Selectmen's meeting. I would like to bring this, our recommendations back to them so we have a discussion. There won't be any action taken tonight, I'm sure, but we can at least have a discussion and hopefully bring it back in the next meeting or so to see what we can go moving forward. There is a cost component. It's not clear that how much we can do before the next fiscal year starts. But now's the time to start planning and see what we can do. So what I've done is put together some dot points. And quite frankly, is I find it a little, I'm sure I could have done this better. One of the dilemmas I have is the project has already started. So I look at this as we do like a project manager for the school. We would start and have a, what do you call it, Peter, clerk of the court, someone responsible for it. From day one. This is already ongoing, so a lot of the statements I've looked at are on the assumption that we're picking up something ongoing and we're trying to corral it. We're trying to be sure that we have a chance to monitor the different aspects of it, to check on it. So if you'll permit me, I'll just briefly go through my dot points, and then I want to I want to sit down and let you guys debate it and come back with your recommendations. Just to finalize that thought, if you can get to Sharon, and then Sharon, if you can get to me any other comments by not too late this afternoon, I can print this out. It's on the agenda. I can hand this out tonight at the board meeting, so I have whatever
Would it be
recommendations
easier
you
for
have.
them to send their comments directly to you?
Better if they come directly to you first
Okay,
and then to me,
all right,
because
all right.
that way I don't get any possible open meeting round robin discussion going on.
Oh, all right.
It's just, it prevents me being yelled at by the powers to be.
And so when they submit the comments, it's going to be strictly to me and not to the whole committee?
Exactly,
All right.
exactly.
I think some of us, our comments will be, now.
Yes.
It won't be this afternoon,
Right,
depending
right.
on our
And we'll-
schedules.
But we'll try to take notes and
Right.
what goes on. So in that regard, do you have another copy for,
Yeah.
I've printed out 10. Yeah, my intent's not to keep this confidential. So I've started off with coordinated implication, that's the wrong word, implementation rather, of the comprehensive wastewater management plan. Excuse me, Noreen?
Okay, so I have a question. And we don't have to answer it at this meeting.
Right.
But it comes off of a comment that Sharon made at the last Board of Selectmen's meeting, or thereabouts. I guess we have to decide, are we designing a position for the project manager of the comprehensive wastewater management project? Or are we designing a position for the project manager for the implementation of phase 2?
We're looking at the CWMP because it'll start and it'll continue on.
Right, I mean, but you know that over the years, many times it was looked at as to start off to be assistance for whichever phase.
There's a component of that, but I think what we
Right.
learn on that we'll want to extend to the next phases.
Right, so, I mean, it kind of sounds like that got decided, you know, behind the, I mean, I never heard it talked about that way before.
Well, that's my, and I'm not sure we ever had a discussion, but that's my answer to your question. My opinion is that this is we're in phase 2 of 8. This will set the stage of how we're moving forward.
For instance, would you expect this person to be,
Or firm,
well, pardon me?
Or firm.
To be well-versed in like the DHY issue?
yes.
Okay, I'm just making sure so we know the scope of the whole, all right, so you really mean the whole ball of wax?
Right.
Okay,
But just to clarify that, at the same time, do you intend to have that entity, if you will, a person involved in the project management of the construction of phase 2, such that on a daily basis or weekly basis, whatever, they're interfacing with CDM Smith, the contractors, et cetera, and even to the point of processing, you know, their invoices and that kind of thing? I mean, this has to be decided.
And I'm hoping you guys have a good discussion on that.
Right.
Because I know, I weaseled out of that. My problem is that, you know, we have people doing that now, so I think the decision that's not clear in my mind is, would this function, that'd be the traditional project manager. The way this is already ongoing, should we try to take that over, this position, or monitor to be sure it's done correctly?
Right.
The way I've written this, I've written it to be so it'll be monitoring it to be sure that it's a check on we're getting everything done as we should.
So today, excuse me,
Sorry.
today, who's processing a CDM Smith invoice? Is it Chris Clark?
Secondary, it goes first to the treasurer, the finance, Carol,
Yeah, okay, so.
and she
so-
signs off, and then Chris Clark does it, yes.
So the real question would be whether this individual, person, entity, whatever, would get that
I'm a-
invoice, if you will, and then process it the same way, once they say, yeah, the work has been done, blah, blah.
And that's right. That'd be my preferred way, but whether we want to do it or not, because then we have a check going, someone watching the overall process.
Just like I envision this person, if it's phase 2 construction, at least, you know, at the end of every week, sits down with the CDM Smith and the contractors and say, okay, what'd you get done this week, and what's the plan for next week? So these folks out here can know what's coming next week,
Right.
or, you know, next month, or that kind of thing.
And I would agree with that. That'd be a way of doing it. And that still goes along with what I'm saying is it doesn't take over the responsibility for doing that, but it's checking that it's done.
I understand.
And that's how I kind of put this together. That's why I've used the word monitoring. Maybe that's too of a wishy-washy term to do what you're saying, but that's
Well, I
kind of
think-
how I envision doing
In
it.
my mind, it's get clarified a lot if you could outline or detail what deliverables might be,
It would, yeah.
whatever you call that,
Yeah.
so.
Maureen?
actually,
Oh.
I think Val,
I just had a quick question. I mean,
Then me.
this almost teeters on an OPM
Right.
position.
It does, yeah.
And it's like a quasi, you know.
It certainly does, yeah.
And, you know, are we going to be required to provide an OPM?
We're not.
Okay.
We're not. That was a question that came up a week or so to Chris Clark. And for some reason, the wastewater projects don't require, have a different regulatory regulation than construction of a, you know, say the high school did or the harbor,
So if it's vertical construction, it does. If it's horizontal, it doesn't,
wherever it is. But this doesn't fall under, we don't require an OPM.
which is an
But-
owner's project manager.
Thank you for clarifying
I
that,
just,
yeah.
for people who don't know.
However, some of the documentation, if you look at the packet in tonight's agenda, because this is on, includes OPM functions, because we want to pay attention to that, even though it's not required.
So it sounds like it's more leaning toward a firm than an individual.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
no,
I was just going to, just for everyone to listen, I was just going to put down some of the things that I put in here before you then open it up for the floor.
Okay.
So I had some of the dot points on this, and it's only a single page, so I tried to keep this as a starting point for a discussion, is to do what you're doing now, conduct regular meetings with people and departments involved in the CWMP. Monitor, and this gets the term that Peter, you mentioned, is monitoring the correct term. work plans, revise appropriate, monitor community sewer collection plans to be sure they're organized, because that's one of the discussions we've had all along, is the timing and when that's organized, is it well understood. Coordinate activities with departments and Pleasant Bay Alliance. A lot of this, Sharon, and you've kind of inferred this in your questions to Heinz and others, is that we haven't paid a lot of attention to what is required from us to by the DR, the District of Regional Impact decision that accepted our CWMP. And those are regulatory concerns that we're required to respond to. And we need to start, and they have specific requirements of having to report the data, what you've done to monitor, and so on. I put one example in here, there's others, just to give people a flavor. Now, I think Sharon, you commented on this, probably take that out, that's up to you. I thought it might be good to put one example of the detail that people are expecting of us in reporting. And I also think we should always double check that we have the resources available to us that we need. I put a section in public engagement. This is some of what we had, a communication coordinator. I won't read that. And then financial. We talk about this, track and report expenses, monitor the project budget. Want to be sure legal documents are signed, completed and signed. We need to always keep track of grant opportunities. We don't, we do that, but sometimes Noreen does it a lot for us. Just one other thing, and I think we need to continue to explore whatever financial assistance options we have for those that need it. We talk about this. We keep talking about, and we should. We need to be creative and look at everything we can do to help those that, you know, need or can benefit from any help we can give them. So that's sort of the format, and then I'll answer questions, but I think now it's pretty much you guys, I'm hoping, will give me guidance.
Okay, so I'll just start off with a couple. One of the ones that was always important to me, whether it's the global OPM or whether it's the phase 2 OPM, and I'll go with the plan for the global OPM, even though it's not really my first pick. But irregardless, I would like a database. We've talked about a database for the phase 2 people. I did look at the health department's ones way back in the spring. Megan was kind enough to go over some of it with me, and it just wasn't in the right format, you know, for what we need, which is so much more basic, you know, things like
yeah, could you just what would you put in the database?
I would put in name, address. I would add on things like when was their septic system put in or last repaired. You know, I mean, right this second, I'm going to draw a blank on what I would put in there. I might put in whether they were seasonal or not seasonal. I would have their contact information. I would like a resource for this committee and other town things to be able to, you know, run down the phase 2 people and go, well, you know, this street seems pretty well set. This one doesn't. You know,
is there a good broad term for that would what would you call that rather than list each one individually? Assessor's database or Assessor's Health Department database?
No. I've looked at those databases. I mean, it'd be so much easier to just rekey in a simple format. The Health Department one has drilled down things about, you know, what...
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to shorten up the the writing.
Have you seen the new database that we have with the water department?
I haven't looked at that one yet since it's moved over.
There's a link both on our website as well as the water department where it's a lot easier now. It's just a PDF.
Yeah. Right.
It has a straight list of,
Right.
I'm not sure if the names, but it's the address.
Right.
And you can open both your tie card and your septic right there.
You know, that's great. But see, what I'm looking more for is something that isn't so technical, that maybe into the tie cards or anything else. I'm looking for a more demographic representation of the area. It doesn't take long to key 650 names and addresses. You know, something that we can add on as issues come up, you know, with each individual house. the databases I've looked at on Acela and on other things are not right for what we want. We want a simple Excel or whatever format access database. And I mean, I'm willing to do the work, but it just seems like we keep going around the bush, you know, trying to decide whose responsibility and trying to use, trying to segue off of other people's.
Yeah,
We would
yeah,
like
that's,
our
that's a
own.
great idea. I'm just looking for,
So you just want a way to phrase it?
thank you.
Okay.
You can
so-
come back to me, but rather than you listed like 6 or 7 individual items.
Right.
If I could phrase that into something that captures
Okay.
That'd be
that.
working with this committee to develop a comprehensive
Right,
database.
yeah.
Comprehensive
For
database.
data, for
Comprehensive
the
data.
East Harwich
That-
Phase 2 project.
Right, that
so.
includes, you know, at least name, address, contact information, status of their septic system, and other details. Leave it at that.
And Noreen, if you could just, for our edification, come up with those fields you want and we
Okay.
can start thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'll add that, I'll add something like that to
Put
this.
something like that in. The other thing I'll do by next meeting, Peter.
Okay.
But I think we need that. And then we can add on as time goes on.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just trying to
Okay.
get the phraseology.
So I think we need to be pretty clear who this individual reports to.
Yeah.
Because you can get mixed signals and you want to make sure you know who you're working for.
Well,
And then what the relationship is to CDM Smith and the construction contractors.
right.
Whether it's hands-off, whether it's, you know, do they have any authority over them? Can they direct them? Can they, you know, ask them to do things that, or do you have to go through the town administrator, or what do you have to do? Okay, and then I think deliverables is key. You know, what are you making a list of actual deliverables? So if you want a quarterly report to the Board of Selectmen, that's one thing. If you want a weekly report of, you know, project status, construction phase or something, or a monthly report or what have you, that's something else. And then you need to define where it says track and report expenses. Is that this firm or individual's expenses? Is it the expenses, what the town's spending its money on and the CWMP? Is it the construction program? What is it, you know?
Yeah.
You have to be very, I think you gotta be, because a lot of that's gonna determine who responds to this or what responds to this.
Good point.
And then I think that, you know, what you have here is your list needs to be converted into duties and responsibilities and you know, that kind of thing. So, you need some work, Larry. I understand where you're going.
No, I agree with that. I want to get the principles agreed to first and then come
Yep.
back to that.
Yep.
Okay, a couple more I would add. I think this person should run a Facebook page or something like that as time goes on, particularly in the spring, when things really start to heat up. Now, we've got 650 people who, within a period of a couple of months, need to determine where their stub is located, so that's gonna be a very active period. It seems to be we need a better way to get information out faster to a group of people. I don't think anybody on this committee is any Facebook page master or would want to be. But that certainly could be done by a firm. So, but either that or another way to get information out faster.
Yeah.
I just envision that in the spring, we're gonna need a
Yeah.
quicker way.
I tried to capture that, and I agree with Peter, we need more details. I tried to capture that, was facilitate multiple computer strategies, website, channel 18, letters,
I would
newspapers.
specifically add Facebook.
And I've added a dot point to specific Facebook.
Right, and also because although some of us might be out of date with it, not like it, many people in the town have requested it, so give it to the project manager.
I also think that you need to clarify whether or not this entity or person has an office somewhere in town or in town hall or Albert House, whatever. And do you want them to have established office hours? I'm just making this up so that, let's say, every Tuesday from 8 to noon, they're there.
Yeah.
So the public would know that. So, you know, if Kelly wanted to add a question or something, she'd come in at that time or whatever and ask the question or get information or what have you. I don't know.
Good point.
All right.
All right, for me or for Kelly?
Oh,
Just, I also think it's important to include in this who's excluded from applying, so that there's no conflict of interest. If they're going to be monitoring CDM Smith, or some of the, yeah, I mean,
Well, in the past, and even though a lot of communication, that's a standard document goes out, no conflicts. So that's covered elsewhere, that's,
okay.
Kelly?
With all due respect, I really disagree with this. I think that the town has enough people working on this project, and I think that the town's chosen very good people to work on this project. I am interested in proposing the potential of breaking this phase down into neighborhoods and soliciting volunteers for the particular neighborhoods to be a liaison. I'm volunteering for Sugar Hill. Like Mr. Heinz Proft presented, he's very resourceful in getting volunteers. And I think that there are enough passionate people out there that are willing to sign on to be a liaison, just to communicate, to not misrepresent how things are getting done, or what the goals are, what the timeline is. At any rate, with the meeting tonight, which I'm going to attend and I'm very excited about, has anybody proposed licensed sanitarians being approved, to conduct the business that needs to be done for homeowners?
I think that's going to be the Board of Health that would do that, no?
Well, the selectmen has to make a decision on that. I think Val's going to comment, but it's open for discussion. We're tied into the agreement with Chatham at the moment. I think we have, that we have to follow their regulations as reasons a professional engineer at the moment. I've gotten some indication that may not tie us into this specific aspect. It may have some flexibility. But we haven't had a chance to run that by our lawyer to see if there's any flexibility to that. You know, but that's we want to do what's cheapest. Right now, we have an IMA with Chatham that requires us to follow their regulations, and they require it. So the question is that requirement firm, or do we have some wiggle room? And that we've asked the legal opinion on. When we get that, we'll come back and discuss it as a board to give a policy decision on it.
Okay, I'd like to get back more onto the
Let me just respond to what Kelly said, because I don't, that's great. I think the volunteers for each neighborhood, we've talked about that for some time. I think that's a separate issue than this.
Yes.
This is trying to get the program and pull it together. We have a lot of things going on. I would hope that would go forward anyway. That was an issue. That falls into a public engagement, volunteer to be sure there's good communication, issues and everything going forward. I see what your suggestion, I would support 100%. I think it doesn't interfere with this. I still think you need some way to tie this all together.
Okay, I'm going to go last with my comments. Does anybody else have any? You, go ahead.
But you had one up. No?
Larry
Okay.
already addressed it.
He did address it, but I'm going to sneak in a comment about it. Larry, since that question about sanitarians versus PEs is causing so much anxiety,
Right.
can we get a definitive, I've heard one Board of Selectmen say it's got to go to town meeting. I've heard another Board of Selectmen say, no, it's charter, we can make our own decision. Could we just get a definitive answer?
That's what we're working on now.
Okay, just so we know what the process is to make that decision.
Because there's some indication that we can do that as a selectman with just
I've heard it
legal.
said.
But we haven't got, I don't know the reason for it, but we haven't got the definitive response yet.
Yeah, all right. So
Excuse me, that's also a reason not to jump at signing up your, PE,
Right.
whatever, at this point in time, because you may have a different option or more options in the future.
Exactly. So my other comment on this list, other than who does the person answer to, but that's a bigger question for bigger committees. I'm a little bothered by the one at the end under financial, which says continue to explore possible financial options for those in need.
Yeah.
I think of that more as a town administration issue myself. If you write down 5 million things that, can never all get done, this person, whoever they are, sure, if they hear about something, they're going to bring that forward, as we all hear as we talk to people. But I really think, you know, the more I see this go down the road, financial issues continue to stay at the top of the questions of concerns.
Right.
And, you know, a volunteer committee can address those, and we don't have any authority either. So, I mean, I wish the Board of Selectmen would consider a piece of administration to be a financial authority or resource on this very important project. Because, as you know, people have made suggestions, and they're kind of getting handled, you know, this way or that way, you know, well, I don't know, is somebody looking at that? Gee, I thought so-and-so, you know, said, you know, you and I send an email, you get an answer back, I don't, you know. I think town administration needs a facet to be financially in charge of this.
I don't disagree with that. I might want to leave it here just to highlight the importance of this issue to
Well,
us.
that's right, but I don't want it to fall to be this person's
It's only-
responsibility.
Okay, all right, I think we're getting into the nitty-gritty before
right.
we have the structure, all right? I don't think we can solve that one little issue
fine.
until we know what this person's going to do. So, does anybody else have, before, because it's getting late, does anybody, go ahead, did you?
No, I'm good.
All right. I'm going to save mine for last, all right? And I'm going to preface it by saying where I'm coming from. I worked as a project manager for a pharmaceutical company, and the way I envision this particular position is not the person that's going to be looking into the financial assistance, not the person that's going to be doing the nitty-gritty, but is going to coordinate with all the individual departments that are going to be required, and I'm going to take it further than what you're saying, because you're focusing on phase 2. This thing, CWMP, if anybody reads it, is very involved. It goes over 40 years, and it's a multi-million-dollar project. Some of us are not going to be alive when this finishes. And the information that is going to be done and collected as it moves through the 40 years has to be tracked somewhere, somehow. When I left the company I was working for, and I had multiple drug projects that I was working on, that had to be handed over to other people that had no idea what was going on, and they had to rely on the information that was collected in order to find out what was going on. That's the way I see this position, as a person that would work with Chris Clark, would work with the Board of Selectmen, would work with CDM Smith, would work with Hines, would work with the Board of Health, would work with the Water Department. They don't need to know the individual of the financing or the engineering. What they need to do is bring them together on a whatever basis, whether it's a monthly or weekly, and understand, based on that decision that we got of what we're required to do, to then say to this person, all right, you're from the Water Department, you know, have you done this? This is, based on what I'm reading, this is what I see we need. Has it been done, and how are you doing it? The engineering over here from CDM Smith, what is your project lines? So that that person has all that information, and it's stored somewhere. It's got to be in paper. If it's not documented, it isn't done, which has been what I've always lived by, all right? There's a lot in that CWMP, and I don't know how many, I mean, the decision, I don't know how many people have read it or realized what is really required in that, but it can't be just phase 2. It has to be the overall. And when whoever that person is that is leaving the Board of Health, or that leaves the Water Department, or whatever they move on, that information isn't lost, that it is physically available somewhere, and that one person has that information. And I'm going to go back to why I'm saying that. So I'm throwing out a little stuff here that really doesn't apply, but it's what I'm trying to get across. I was the one person for my project that dealt with the FDA, Europe, and Japan, all right? You couldn't call the FDA, you couldn't call the FDA, and you couldn't call the FDA. If you had issues, you had to bring it to me as the project manager to do it. And what I envisioned in this project is a person like that. Not the person that's going to, like you say, go out and check for the finances. It could be the town administrator's responsibility to do that. But that person has to say, hey, what have you done? What have you found? And have it documented. That person to me is maybe instead of project management or project coordinator. That's how I see the position. Then underneath that is some of the things that person needs to, that word is monitor. I can't come up with a better term right now. But to make sure that it is being done and have some sort of a spreadsheet that can log and say, okay, this was done, this was when it was done, this is who did it. All right? So there's somebody, if Cape Cod Commission comes and says, hey, your monitoring program, when was it done? How was it done? What are your results? What were your protocols? That we can go and say, Heinz would have them and say, here they are. Here they are. That's my vision of this. Now, I could be totally wrong. And it's going to be up to this committee and the board to decide. That's the way I see this position. This, to me, is too nitty-gritty. It almost looks like this single person is going to be responsible for doing some of this nitty-gritty work that, like you said, should be done by the town administrator, or the work that's going to be done by Heinz or the Board of Health. Not that they're going to do that. They just need to make sure that based on the decision that came from the Cape Cod and from the state, because there's two of them that basically say the same thing, that we are fulfilling those requirements. Who does it is going to be up to that person to decide. That's just how I'm seeing this. So it's hard for me to look at this and think that this one individual person is going to be doing all of these little nitty-gritty things.
Let me support you on that, because I think tracking,
Absolutely.
rather than monitoring.
Tracking, there you go. I like that.
We were looking for a missing report 3 or 4 years ago in my neighborhood. We don't know whether it was external to the town, it was an ecological report, was it? No, people remember reading it. No one knows who has it. No one can find it. There's no number, there's no name, but people remember reading it. And that's the kind of thing that I can see really coming back to bite us. And I
Yes.
think
Over the-
that's what we want
Over
to
the
avoid.
40 years, because there should be a central location
Yeah,
for
What
all
if
that
the data
information.
is-
right.
Sorry, what
Yeah.
if the data disappears? We know we had it, where did it go?
Well, even then, sometimes the people are no longer,
Well,
we could be dust by then. Some of us will be.
Well, certainly 40 years out, yeah.
oh jeez.
But I don't, that's the reason I used the word monitoring, and I had tracking in there one time. I took it out because I didn't monitor track, was not the expectation we do all this, but to be a central place of pulling together. I do disagree with you, however, on throwing out the financial, because if we're going to track stuff and monitor, we need to keep in line what we're spending, because
I'm not throwing it out. I'm not throwing it out. I'm not throwing it out. I'm just saying that person needs to maybe track it. We get away from that word monitoring. But who's doing that actual work? Is it not her, or is it not that person?
Right, but if we're going to get all the information together, we need to include financial aspects in there as well.
And it would be all of this, including the financial.
Yeah.
So it's, when I say it's the CWMP, I would also then put in this public engagement and financial. And if you read the decision, they talk about outreach. They talk about outreach, so that is in there. So all I'm saying is, I don't think that that particular person needs to be looking at what the financials are. Does that person have to fully understand at the time what the DHY is all about? You won't, unless you get somebody from the town. If you're getting somebody from a business that's going to provide a project manager coordinator, they aren't going to be familiar with the DHY. They aren't even going to be familiar with the decision. That's something they're going to have to pick up quickly, unless we can get somebody local from one of the towns that have gone through some of this. But I'm going back to what Noreen is saying is, the town administration, all right, whoever, it should be the one looking at the financials. And then bring it back and say, this is what I found.
The goal of this is to bring it all back, all together.
Right.
Because there's too many, there's so many moving pieces that's what we're trying to do here.
Yes.
Is bring it all back together to a central location. So we can play as word sound, but that's what we're trying to do, I think.
But I think when this comes to the board, I think that's what the board needs to see. What is the overall structure and how is it going to function? Then, when you have those outlines, then you can fill in as the responsibilities some of these things, is the way I see it. So that's just my comments.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Just for clarity, it's not a huge point, but when I was talking about the financials, I was only talking about bullet 5. That's just a comment that I didn't think was appropriate on this list. But my bigger comment is to support what both Sharon and Ann said. I think that's absolutely the coordinator. We've all felt that, you know, this department's doing one thing, this department's doing one thing, but things get lost and there are gaps. So that's what the whole manager idea is to do. Given that, though, I would like to see a very explicit subset, be it a deliverable or whatever. I feel that one of the most important duties is coordination with the neighborhoods of the Phase 2 area.
Yeah.
And I think that should be outlined so bold, so giant in black and white. Everything else is important and will be absorbed and coordinated as the thing moves on. But,
All right, can I just jump in on that a second? When you're talking about that, the way I would see that person doing it would be, this is where I think our committee could come in.
Absolutely.
Where that coordinator could work through us
Right, yeah.
to
Right.
maybe work with the outreach. In other words, not that that person did it,
And
but,
that's fine, but, well, I think the person
Yeah.
should do a lot
Oh,
of it too.
yeah.
But, you know, that the responsibility falls there, that, you know, if
Yes.
somebody says, there's a person over in ABC Street who's very upset, and nobody's talked to them, they've left phone calls with such and such and such and such, which does happen sometimes. They haven't had return calls, that's the person we call.
Yes.
To get out there, we don't call a committee meeting, so.
right, right.
I have a suggestion. It's a lengthy title. Comprehensive Data and Multi-Department Response Coordinator.
That's a little,
It's a mouthful.
it's just a, you could make it,
Coordinator, some type of a coordinator.
rather than maybe management, I like the coordinator term better,
Yes.
but it's, I wouldn't make it a lengthy thing. This is a project coordinator,
Project coordinator.
or CWMP project coordinator,
It's also
something.
as silly as the audience you get when you put out requests for proposals. You say project manager, you're gonna get a certain echelon of people. You start using other words, and
Yeah.
you might wind up with administrative assistants. I mean, they're all good, all wonderful in their own right, but,
Keep it simple.
yeah, we want
Keep
a
it
project
simple.
manager. It's the duties we have to
Yeah,
Right.
form, so it's our project
And I
manager.
support your idea of what it means.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
thank you. So,
What do
Val,
we do
I'm
next?
gonna kind of put you on the spot, since you've had some of this, you've worked through some of this with Chatham. Do you have anything you can share with us that you think we're heading down the right track, we're not heading down the right track? What do you think?
I think we're on the right track. I think project manager, but understanding that it's, their function is pretty much coordinating and ensuring that everyone's communicating and that we're all going the right track. I support Larry and what you're trying to accomplish here. We've had a couple of projects in Chatham, wastewater, and then we've also had water. Wastewater pretty much did not have an OPM. Water did have an OPM, that was time bond.
Do you want to just explain for people that might listen to this, what you're,
Basically, you have the town, the engineer, and you have a third party looking out for the town's best interest. That's the way I view it. And there was also a valued engineering that occurred too with CDM, where GHD, the company, was designing the wastewater plant, and the town engaged the services of CDM to come in and make sure that what they were designing was in fact in the town of Chatham's best interest. And there were some adjustments that were made that actually helped reduce some of the cost of the overall cost of the wastewater. On the OPM, Ty and Bod came in, looked at the design that was done by Weston and Sampson, and made adjustments and were able to reduce some of the cost as well. So there's some benefit to having an OPM and also a valued engineering as well. But I think for Harwich, I think this is the right approach. I think you should have a coordinator to ensure that the departments and all the players are definitely communicating, and that deliverables are important. Performance metrics are, implemented and held to as well. Financially, I see the town's financial department monitoring this. I think that's where I'm not sure I agree that this particular position should jump knee-deep into the finances. That's my opinion. But I also think that, we need a public outreach. That is, we need to get the information to be accurate, precise, clear, for everybody, from the engineer down to the homeowner who has never been through any of this before, that their biggest concern is money. And I understand that, So I think we're going down the right track, and I support Larry, and I support this group. That's the reason I'm on this group. So hopefully I've answered your question.
I just thought maybe if you had anything in particular, you would say, no, I don't think you should do this, or, you've been through some of this. So, Noreen.
There's another piece of this that we talked about way back, and I don't know the easiest way to do it other than reading the whole contract, and I don't feel like doing that. But I would like to know what the actual contractual duties of the CDM Smith resident engineer and oversight of construction would be. If somebody can figure out a way to get that in a list form, because this person should kind of be keeping an eye on what they are supposed to be checking. The resident engineer of CDM Smith is checking on the construction company. But we can't just let those two other parties that aren't the town be alone to do that. We need like a third eyeball on that. And also because it's a form of communication. Because once construction starts, and that will be next spring, there's going to be residents calling with questions from this street and from that street. It's important that somehow the powers that be, so to speak, all of us kind of know where they are and what they're doing, So bottom line, long way of saying it, how could we get a list of what the oversight, the CDM Smith oversight, is in their contract to design, their construction oversight? I'm looking at Larry.
I know. I feel like going through full mouth things either. Let me see if I can get some help on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I hate to try to dig through those contracts again just for those, but thanks.
Okay. Wait till I get I kind of lost my, okay. Are we finished with the?
I'll wait for, I've written a lot of dot points down from all of you. I'll try to do some things, and you can send them to the chair. You can give me anything else on.
Well,
If the, what, go ahead.
no, I'll say one more thing just about timing, and we don't know how tonight's discussion will go, but excuse me, sometimes it goes very quickly. I'm kind of hoping that this would go out as a request for proposal right after January 1st, that we have a month to beat it up, and that's when it would go out. Thereby, if we were lucky enough to get a lot of responses and it's well-written, and, you know, after the proper interview time, you know, maybe we could get somebody in by March or April. We have enough funds to do that.
Yeah.
And so what is your idea of the timing?
I think that'd be appropriate, because we're moving into Thanksgiving, there's no reason to rush it. It'll take a while to, you know, this is a broad concept, we need to flesh it out.
Yeah.
I certainly got points of changing management to coordinator, for
Right.
instance. I got some other things. I
And
can
my
go forward.
experience with sending things out in December in the political world.
Doesn't
just
happen
it
anyway.
doesn't do any good,
Right.
so January then would be our
So-
target.
I'll update this from what I have from the day, but if you send me more, I'll bring it in for, because there'll be an open discussion again tonight with input.
All right, I have a
This
question.
is a process.
All right, I'll run it by you later, because it's a question I don't know that we can answer here, so as far as tonight goes. Because
You know,
I'm given
just,
the,
just to reiterate, you know, what we're trying to do is pull together in some reasonable fashion all the different moving parts, so that it makes sense, not to us, because we're paying attention to it, but to everyone else.
yeah,
So it's easy to understand, and that is what we're trying to do with all this stuff.
all right.
Great, thanks, Larry.
All right, okay, moving on, this is gonna dovetail right into the next one. Projects moving forward, all right? One of the things that I think that, and we have, up till now, have not had time to do, is sit down as a committee and go through that decision that was handed down by the Cape Cod and the state, so that we as a committee are familiar with it and what is required. Now, I had put a spreadsheet together way back when, it's a couple years, when this first came out. Probably could be modified somewhat, because I wasn't as familiar with everything that was going on. So it might be, we could make it shorter. But I think until we would get a project coordinator, that maybe we could consider looking, which is what originally is in our charge, is to be monitoring that. We like that word, monitoring. The overseeing whether or not these things are being done. All right, so if you look at the fact that chances are we aren't going to have anybody, we're going to be lucky if we have somebody by March. Just to go back and say, okay, I'm going to throw out a for instance, and this is just one. Permitting was supposed to be, from my understanding, and I'm not saying it's not done. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we don't know. Has that been submitted to Cape Cod Commission? It's supposed to be, all the permits that are being done are supposed to be submitted. I don't know if they're being done. I don't know who's responsible for it. That's just one of the things that I'm looking at as to maybe things moving forward, along with any further communication for, like, let's say, the Phase 2 people. Now, that one letter went out Monday. Did you get one?
Did not get one.
You didn't get it?
I did not get
When I say it was a letter, and it contained one of these.
Well, I have plenty of those, but I didn't get it specifically in the mail. I did not get this, and I did not get this, no.
Okay, that's interesting, because we had,
I know, and people in my
Okay,
neighborhood
somebody
got
got
it,
it.
but I didn't get one.
Oh.
Not everyone got them.
it should have
That's what I'm
been,
saying.
all right, and what I was told, that the list that was used was everybody on the list that was going to be sewered. Can you double,
My neighbor didn't get one either.
can you do me a favor and check with Megan? Because she was the one that provided them with that list, and it was supposed to be everybody on, that was going to be sewered was going to get one of these. All right? All right, thank you.
Okay, so I think everybody is on your side here on this issue of getting more familiar with this.
Oh, all right, okay, oh, okay.
Just to cut to the chase. if you
Okay,
don't mind.
all right.
So, I mean, because whether or not we get our project manager and what their roles are, I mean, I think this committee should have at least, you know, a higher level than we do now.
Yes.
Of, understanding of this. I've been carrying these, I've never gone through them in detail, you know. But, so the question I would ask you, is how do you want us to proceed?
I guess if I keep going
go,
back
cut
to
to the
my
chase.
previous life, all right, would be, I'm going to ask you guys to read that decision.
Okay.
And I'm not, all right, and I'm going to do like my professors would say, read it as a novel.
All right. So you mean these two documents?
Yes.
All
They
right.
are very similar,
Okay.
very similar.
Just trying to get the
read them like you
facts.
would, don't try to remember everything that's in it. Read it like a novel.
Okay.
Then when we discuss it, maybe your brain will say, oh, I remember seeing that somewhere, and you can go back and look at it.
All right.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm going to say that has to be the starting point
Okay.
where you as a committee are familiar with what's in those documents. Then, as a committee, we can decide, okay, what do we think are the things that we need to look at right now? What are some of the things that are deliverables that should have or need to be delivered soon? And like I said, we're not saying that they're not. I want to make that very clear. I'm not saying that this hasn't been done. I'm just saying I don't know who knows whether it's been
All right.
done.
So you're saying that for next meeting, we should have read these two documents?
Yes.
And you will have an item on the agenda to
Yes.
then discuss them?
Yes, now,
Homework.
just to make you guys feel a little better, the next one won't be until,
December.
December.
4th,
Right.
December 4th.
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
we're moving on.
So, all right, that's my idea of some of the projects that I think need to be done, not losing sight of the Phase 2 people. I don't know yet what more needs to go out, what more needs to be done. I like your idea of that time frame, a little bit more of what you need, but I think that we would have to get through Chris Clark and CDM Smith, a more, more definitive timeline, like what you were referring to.
It just seems that the information that's out now is very overwhelming, and it includes doing several things at a very ambiguous, during a very ambiguous time frame.
Yes.
So if it was more detailed and pinned down as to what exactly needs to be done and give a window.
Yes, yeah, all right, a window, yes.
If I may have a comment on that as well, is that I think part of the confusion is, well, let me say it differently. It would help clarify if we had two columns. One would be the timeline for the resident, and one's the timeline for the town. Because I guess
Or a resident timeline.
so I can look at it as a homeowner and say, well, this is what I need to do by this date. The town's doing this by this date, because I think
Yeah.
that's some of the confusion. We get mixed up between the town. I mean, that's what started this discussion between what the town guidelines, but just let people know specifically what, their timelines and in the town.
Yeah, a resident timeline. I think
Exactly.
that's good. Noreen?
Okay, so under projects moving forward, I have a couple of topics to discuss. I think one of the next most important things we have to do, other than, defining this project management piece, we've talked about it for a year. We've got to figure out how to determine our neighborhoods and our neighborhood liaisons. We actually talked about this a year ago, and we've been so busy with other things, we never got into the specifics. But April, May is coming, and that's when there's gonna be many different neighborhoods trying to determine stubs, and also starting to watch construction go through their streets with whatever problems may ensue from that. So I would put that on the table and say, do we assign somebody? How are we gonna do it? Do we take a map? How are we gonna pick our neighborhoods and then locate neighborhood liaisons that we can work with the liaisons, and then eventually maybe a project manager can also work with the liaisons? But I don't see any reason to wait when we have a volunteer right here. One.
I don't know how we're going to appoint anybody.
Well, we're not gonna appoint anybody. We're an advisory committee. We just say this is the person working with us, yeah. Yeah.
And I think other than saying at our meetings, we are looking for neighborhood liaisons
No.
in a group.
I think we need to, take a map and take a red pen and, make some circles, and
Then what?
then recruit somebody. We all know people, you know, so then you say, oh, we've got Jane Doe from this area. Good, that area is done. Gee, we don't have anybody from there. Who do we know over there? Let's, you know, put the arm on that person. I mean,
Go ahead.
that's,
Go ahead.
Maybe one of the ways to have people self-identify, if you will, is, you know, when Dan and Megan go out and do their presentations, which they're beginning to do, they have a schedule. Perhaps the thing to do is to go with them and say, who in this group, or maybe two people in the group, because people have other obligations and travel and all of that, but who wants to be the tag team for difficult issues? Because you can have a neighborhood where 9 out of 10 people have the simplest ever installation you've ever seen, and you have one poor soul who has everything you could possibly encounter in doing an installation. And the neighbors will know that best. And that might be the best way, because then you've had them make the connection with us, with Dan, with Megan, and anyone else that we choose to have them interact with. You know, who do I call for help with? That's the arena.
no, if I could, I think Ann, you know, makes a great point. If the more neighborhood involvement, you know, the better. They know their streets. But I also would like to see this, you know, move along fairly fast. So maybe we could make sure at December's meeting that Dan and Megan are here, so that we can formulate some plan and maybe bring in a bigger map and start drawing circles. I mean, the worst that can happen is we make a mistake and then the neighbors say, well, that's silly, you shouldn't have put those houses with that neighborhood. Well, you know, guess what? We'll move it, you know. But,
I completely support that idea, and I think it's helpful. What was I going to say? That one person. What I did with the meeting that I had was I wanted to present it as information only from a very objective standpoint, and present to the homeowner what your options are. What your options are. These are the people who are licensed. These are the people that work the Chatham, you know, tying in. These are the people, and I've got a list so far. I'd like to maybe tweak the list a little bit with everyone's approval, to figure out exactly what can be done, who can be hired, when the permitting process is going to begin, as far as designs and hiring people. I mean, there's proposals, there's contracts, there's permits, right? Is that how it goes? Somebody comes along and says, well, I propose to do this. Okay, well, let's get a contract. Okay, I have to go get the permit. So it's just, I think things like that, where the homeowner's given options, is going to reduce the angst, diffuse anxiety, and have people have more confidence in their town administration.
Going back to this liaison thing, I think that liaison person, let's say it would be you, if somebody comes to you with, in your group and say, what do you know about this or that you don't necessarily need to know that in the event that you may give them the wrong information. Right. Your job would be to Board of Health or Dan, and if that doesn't fit, bring it to this committee and we can try to find out who to go to. So not that person has to feel as though you have to have all the answers. Right. You don't. Your job would be to liaison people in your community with
I would simply give them direction to the resource that they're
exactly.
looking,
Yes.
to accomplish whatever problem they're having.
Yes.
It would just be I'd be a directional person.
Yes, exactly. So not that you feel, I don't want somebody out there thinking that, gee, I might do that, but I don't want them to think they need to know all the answers. They just need to know where to direct people.
I would want to emphasize, as we always do, that outreach is the two-way process. Mm-hmm. I'm concerned that in the spring, things may come up, and we don't have a way right now to get speedy information to you folks. At least if we had, I mean, if we had a database with everything in it, that'd be great, but at least if we had liaisons, we can get emails to the liaisons to get things, you know, if things change in the construction schedule, so many things can happen, and we need a better outgoing communication method with these 650 people, and
There are about 55 people in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
So if you could imagine having a liaison for about 55 people, or kind of, you know, figure that out.
You know what I might design? Maybe I'll design a contact sheet just to have it ready. You know, I don't even know what'll be on it yet. Name, address, and contact information also. Maybe a couple of basic questions about your septic system or things like that. Or are you a seasonal? Is this your primary home? Is this not your primary home? Because so many of the financial decisions are based on that. And maybe I'll just prepare that and run it by this committee, so we have something ready, so we could start giving it to some of the neighborhoods. You know, you can give it to your 55 and bring it back. You know, then we can incorporate it into a database and also have a speedy way to get in touch with them, so.
For that matter, a list of who got the mailings and who didn't.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you can kind of canvass some of the people in your area, how many got that letter? Because that was mailed, not this, I have to check with Evan. I don't think it was this past Monday, I think it was the Monday before.
All
I think it
right,
was the
so
Monday before.
I volunteered to do a contact.
I thought you would.
Which I'll bring back to this committee.
All right.
I'm sure there'll be things to
I have
add.
a couple of people in the neighborhood that are working with me to get information out there, and, but they're kind of looking to me for.
It's
leadership.
nicer if we have like one or two maybe contact people to say, this is what we found out, you can disseminate it.
Yeah.
All right.
So just to finish this off, so could we have this as an agenda item next December also? And make sure that Dan, and if not, we'll rearrange
All right, are we
it.
just going to call it neighborhood liaisons and we can take
Yeah.
it from there? Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I would like it if you could have a big map. I'm gonna draw big circles.
Where are we getting this big map?
I don't know, from down in the corridor or something. I mean,
Right.
well, I mean, there's gotta be people with plotter printers who can print us a big map.
We could probably print something.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be, you're volunteering? Love it. All right, we'll take it.
A big map,
Get a big piece of paper and put it on project the map.
right.
Well, what we can do is take a big piece of paper and we'll scotch tape it to
Then we
that
won't know
board.
who they are.
I'll bring
What
one.
we stop
Project one.
Okay.
I like your idea.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 copies in case.
Yeah, a couple.
In case
And,
she draws
I mean,
outside the line.
the best thing to do is start, I mean, I always think the best thing to do is start doing it, and then people will say, no, that's crazy, this is what you should do.
Well,
and
we'll
then
just
have
we
it.
can take that chalkboard down there and tape it to the chalkboard so we can
Yeah. draw
color within the
circles.
lines.
Kind of like 1947.
Yes.
and,
All right, so
Okay,
we
the
need
more-
2. For sure.
All right.
All right, thank
So-
you.
I'm going ahead under projects moving forward,
Okay.
all right? So, and this is kind of well, I don't know if it's a small or a big project. So at any rate, a few weeks back, while I was tracing down something else, a loan program through the state, so I'll just mention quickly that like Barnstable County has their loan program, the state has the same thing. The advantages are purely convenience, not money, in that the resident would, the amount owed would be placed on their tax bill, so when they paid their quarterly tax bill, it would be taken care of as opposed to a separate bill. But it would still be 5%, and still have the other things the same as the Barnstable County loan program. The difference is, for the Barnstable County loan program, the individual applies for that. For the state community septic loan program, the town applies for that. So the town, so that's a town decision. It doesn't involve us as to whether or not they want to go ahead and do that. Again, it's not that attractive where there is some convenience, but it doesn't change the 5% or anything else. So At any rate, while I was digging around looking at that, I stumbled across a tax credit called Schedule SC, which is, so I'm just getting this out to the public. So this is, SC stands for septic credit, actually, but they verified, and it says it on the Department of Revenue website, that this also covers the costs for connection to a sewer system. I think it's a rather complicated schedule. I mean, I haven't done my own personal taxes in 40 years, so, I mean, naturally it would look complicated to me. But I believe it's a true tax credit, and by that I mean it won't come off your adjusted gross income, it will actually come off your tax. Remember, I'm not a tax accountant. In other words, if your Massachusetts tax is determined to be $5,000 for the year, and then you got a credit for $1,000, it would actually come off your tax. So these are the really good kinds of tax credits. It's up to $6,000, and it can be spread over 4 years. It also has a somewhat complicated carrying system. So like if you don't use it all in year 1, you can carry the credit forward to year 2. And since we have people, so I mean, it's really a marvelous, marvelous thing. I believe it's only for primary homeowners. So, I mean, these are the things that vary a lot. And there are other qualifiers when you get into the nitty-gritty. But there are some people who have already paid down payments to professional engineers. So those people would qualify for this in January, just a month from now. So my question would be, okay, so I sent it off to Evan and Carol and the town financial people, and I guess Larry heard back. I didn't hear back anything. Since then, one of Larry's neighbors went to a tax accountant and got some kind of confirmed what I said, some, yeah, similar information. But so my question to the committee is, if I was one of the people who had spent $1,000 on a PE, and then I wasn't informed about this, and April 15th went by and I didn't know about it, and I missed that tax credit, I probably wouldn't be terribly happy. So how do we get the word out between now, and not necessarily us as opposed to the town? How does the word get out between now and January to tell people there is this vehicle available?
All right, with that thought, my question would be, Larry, you're on the hot seat again. I personally don't think it's appropriate for us to be telling people this because we aren't the tax people. Is there somebody on the financial, I don't know, we have a committee or a board or whatever the financial people are, that would be able to get up and speak to this?
Let me hedge this a bit. As I was mentioning to Noreen, one of the feedbacks I got was that we have to be careful as a town committee of making any recommendations on how individuals handle their taxes.
That's why I didn't want that to come from us.
And I think what Noreen just said is perfect because it says there are tax accountants out there. I think the only thing we can say is that people need to check with their own tax accountant to see if the credits are available. As a town, we can't take it, we can't recommend it, we can't, it's informational. So let me talk with others and how we get that out on the informational base. I mean, you just did this now. People do pay attention to this committee. So people will be aware of it.
Right.
And you've done it in a way that we're not taking position on it. It's just saying that, you know, if you're you can check into it.
I'll tell you, in no way do
Because we don't
we
want liability.
recommending. You know, it's just a question of, Larry actually asked this question last summer, and I had never heard anybody ask the question before. Remember, it was about another issue, and I said, good question. And unfortunately, some of the town people, because we all don't know everything, that's another reason why we might need another project manager, they replied that they had no knowledge of any tax credits that apply to this situation.
Right.
So you see, this town is on a learning curve too.
And
And
partly,
so-
yeah.
Okay, but so my point is not to recommend, but to not let people know these things are out here. I feel we're being remiss if we don't let them know that they're out there.
I think that's one of the informational things that would be good with the neighborhood groups that you talk to, is again, just providing information that may be something to look into.
Right.
I think Val had a,
Well, no, it goes back to your bulleted items. I understood you took issue to the last
Right.
item, but this is, kind of falls right into it. I mean, for this person to explore, the coordinator, manager, whatever you want to call them, to explore options like that, or at least encourage the homeowners to go and talk to their, the people who are handling their taxes. I mean, this is the first I've heard of it, and quite
Right.
frankly, I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
I'm in phase two, so whatever I can do to save some money. Thank you, I appreciate it.
It's good information. One of the issues that came up at my home meeting was people who had to have a Title V septic system recently installed. And was there going to be any, I don't know, either compensation, for lack of a better term, or something that would be recovered from their expense? Does this apply?
Well, in a different way, I mean, you're gonna be paying taxes that year anyway. You can get $6,000 off of your taxes, so, I mean, it depends on, you'll be $6,000 richer, and look at that as an offset on the expense you
Right.
put to, it doesn't directly come off what you're paying the guy who runs the backhoe.
You have up to $6,000 within so many years, I
4
would
years.
imagine. 4
So
years?
there's a lot of room.
And how far back does it go for people who had to do a Title V septic system?
This isn't about Title V, this
Not.
is about connecting to the sewer system.
Okay.
Purely connecting to the sewer system. Yes, it's called septic credit, because that's what it was years ago.
Oh.
But what we're talking about is it's covering connections in all forms,
Oh, that's
design,
wonderful.
all expenses, everything.
That's good
to you.
news.
Yeah, but so how do we get that good news out? That would be the thing. I
Thank you.
just more or less to say that you gave it the title, septic,
Schedule SC,
Septic credit.
right.
but I think then it's on the homeowners, or by word of mouth from other homeowners, to say, this is available. I am personally uncomfortable with providing details on that.
I'm not.
All right.
I just want to clarify, that's a state schedule,
That's
SC,
correct. Yeah.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, so it's on your state tax only, you'd say. Yeah, I'm not uncomfortable because it's only facts, like, I'm not gonna tell anybody, I'm not gonna tell Val, this is how you put out the form. I don't even do my own taxes, and I'm only a 1040, So, I mean, I'm not gonna tell anyone what to put where and what carryover, or, anything else like that, but, it exists, it's there, and I'll tell you what they tell me.
You know what, we encourage you to go out and talk to the people that are doing
Right.
your taxes. There may
Yes,
be some
and yes.
financial
It's not a
benefit,
discussion that would
period.
automatically come up this April with your tax accountant. You wouldn't necessarily think to say, by the way, 3 years from now, I'm gonna be doing this. So you could miss this year's opportunity for those that.
And they may
have
not even
payment.
think to bring something like that up, but if you
No.
have
of
that
course not.
information to be able to question them, and then get the information, professional information from
Well,
them.
Larry thinks I just got it out, but I think the committee, depending on their level of comfortability, should think of other ways to get it out again and again and again until January, for the sake of those people. I almost wish I had a list of the people who already spent money, because if it goes beyond April, they lose part of their chance. So just let
Should-
that fester.
Should we consider putting a little blurb on the town website under the sewer, just encouraging a discussion with the tax consultant?
Well, that involves administration to make that, it's not our decision.
I'll follow up on it,
Okay.
because you could.
You got your exercise today.
Yeah, there's information. I mean, you could just say something as simple as, be sure you check with your accountant or tax person when you file. There may be some help.
Regarding this, though,
Regarding
because,
the
No, regarding the
Yeah.
the collection system. I think we could phrase this so it's informational and not get
That'd
in
be
trouble.
great. And maybe Dan and Megan can incorporate it into
Yeah.
everybody
I
they
think
talk
we'll
to.
just work and see.
You know, just say,
Uh,
Schedule SC, check it out.
Is
Just-
there a link that they could go to?
A link could be created if somebody wanted to do that. It's
I
on
mean-
the State Department of Revenue website.
All right, what I'm saying is something like that, if we put that on the,
I'll follow up and see what we can do.
yeah,
As I said, we just need to be careful. that we-
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
You need stuff.
yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
All excited.
See, it was worth joining this committee.
So is there anything else? Anyone else have any? Not
So
that,
I
not
would-
that
I
this
would
is.
I would ask that you put it on next month's agenda again. Not
have
as
it
a
right
lengthy,
there.
oh, good girl. Not as a lengthy discussion,
Right
but
there.
just as another opportunity, because
Yeah,
if we argue
You know what,
about it,
we
we're
can bring
getting
it up, we can bring
information
it up
out.
every meeting we have.
Yeah, well, why not? And we can argue, and that way people get the information.
We're discussing, we're not arguing, we're
Okay.
discussing, yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have to be cognizant of the time.
Yes. Yes, so do I. All right, movement, anything else pertinent?
Well-
Oh, go ahead.
So Chris did Chris,
He's not here.
well, I know, but he spoke to Larry on his way
Oh.
out. He spoke-
That was my one order when Chris left, actually.
Oh, okay.
Because DHY is continuing ongoing, and we met, you guys had a good meeting. I was out of state. We had a DHY, Dennis Harwich, Yarmouth Regional Sewer Plant meeting. The Friday following that, and best I can say right now, negotiations are still ongoing. There were some good points brought up at that meeting, as have come from the other selectmen, trying to clarify some of the issues of, you know, the number of members on the board came up, how they're appointed came up. The financial aspects of that in terms of reviews, transparency came up, and some clarifications on that. So the negotiations are still ongoing. You know, we still at this point hope to move this forward in the spring. However, I know I and Don Howes joined our committee, so we have two selectmen from Harwich on that committee. I think we're both on agreement that we want to move forward, but only if we are, guarantees wrong word, but we want assurance that we've had to use today's term, proper engagement, so everyone is, we've communicated with everyone their concerns, we've taken a response, we've explained it to get it on, but time is short.
Do you
so
want to
we
bring
don't
up about the DHY meeting Thursday?
know. Yes, we have thank you.
What do you say me for doing it?
We have a DHY joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, the wastewater, you guys, the wastewater support committee, and I'm not sure whether capital outlay, they probably as
Yeah,
well,
I
but
thought they
Community
were.
center.
but it'll be at the community center at 6 o'clock
Community center.
No, Harwich.
Yes.
in Harwich,
Yeah.
Harwich Community Center at 6 o'clock. And the purpose, and David Young from CDM Smith will be leading the discussion. And it's again, just to get information out. It'll be, because we've had the Wednesday night meeting, I think it was, but we haven't had a meeting with FinCom and, you know, the other, to get them all as up to date as they should be. They're aware of it, but this will be that discussion.
Excuse me, through the chair, you just, in your previous section, referred to a committee. Were you talking about the committee that's gonna write the agreement? What committee were you talking
It'll
about?
be the committee that writes the agreement as a
Okay,
draft to bring it
So you
back.
said now we have two.
We had a committee first with the selectmen from each town, each of the three towns, and the town administrator, which I was the appointed selectman. And this was looking at moving forward with the spatial legislation. We brought it
Right,
back to
right,
town
right.
meeting and moving that forward. The thought was that when we get to the agreement itself between the towns, that's where the details really come down to the nitty-gritty. So we wanted a broader representation before we draft that and bring it back to the towns.
Okay, I get that. But I'm back to this committee. So So basically, it's gonna wind up being one agreement. The same agreement is gonna go to each of the three cities'
correct.
town meetings.
That's correct.
The same exact agreement.
Same exact agreement.
Okay, and so our two players to write this agreement are you and Don Howell.
Right, well, along with CDM Smith is drafting it, Chris Clark is there, John Giorgio from KP Law is our.
You know, but I think of them as resources, you know, I mean,
Right.
I.
Right, we're doing it.
Our representatives, I
Right,
just
our-
want, I'm not criticizing.
Our
I just-
representatives are myself and Don Howe.
Okay, and so you're gonna have, you working with the other towns, are gonna have a document ready by March so we can review it for town meetings?
If we don't have it ready by March, we won't review it for town meeting because
Okay.
it'll be too late.
Well, it's a daunting task, I would think. I mean, I would like to see it go on town meeting in May, but it doesn't seem possible. But I'm
We have varying
I'm-
opinions on that, among ourselves.
Pardon me?
We have varying opinions among ourselves.
Yeah.
I think we're fairly close. I think we'll have an agreement. My concern is whether that will give us proper time to do the public outreach.
You know, if I could just ask you one thing that I was thinking about asking about on Thursday night, depending on how that discussion goes, but I still have to review the tape for the one I missed, so I don't know. But I just feel that we kind of missed one step in this process. And to me, that was that step, you know, I'm getting more settled with the idea of this arrangement,
Yeah.
which in the beginning I was very uncomfortable with. But I'm getting more settled only because it only controls the treatment center, you know, and not the area. But what I don't know is I don't know what other public entity types were considered in the private discussions of the DHY group. Like, was this just put out and people said, oh yeah, that'll work? Or was it considered to be one structured, for instance, maybe like the Dennis Water District, where everybody votes, you know? So, I mean, you know, I just feel like it was jumped to, okay, we want a partnership, this is what we're gonna do, and we all thought about it a certain way. It was very vague. Then all of a sudden, this thing came out, and it was like, oh my goodness, this is not, you know, what I was expecting at all. So there's a vagueness in the middle there.
Yeah.
Are you coming to the Thursday meeting?
Yeah, good. But I mean,
The-
I hope that we don't have to start off by fighting about this one if I don't get a feeling of comfort by
Yeah.
why we picked this one.
Yeah. We picked this one, we had there were some other possibilities that came before us.
Right, but not before us.
And actually, some before I joined the committee. I think from our standpoint, the easier way would be to duplicate what we did between Harwich and Chatham.
Right,
It's hard to do that directly because one of the things that makes that work is that Chatham has an existing sewer plant that we could basically buy capacity into.
yeah.
This is a new entity, and so it'd be a heavy lift to say that, ask Dennis to build the plant first and then sell us the services, you know, to carry that. So that kind of ruled out.
Wasn't Dennis
They-
Water District a new entity?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I
I
might.
don't want to overstate. The other, CDM Smith brought this to the committee, as my understanding, because of the success they had with the three towns. Help me out.
Yeah.
Norton,
Foxborough.
Falmouth, and
Not Falmouth, it's Norton, Mansfield,
Foxborough.
Foxborough.
Foxborough. Third one, of bringing this together. And so they had the, you know, the documentation that had gone through the State House and some of the, and so we went it that way.
Okay.
And you know,
Yeah, I don't want to beat it to death. It's just that on Thursday night, I think it would help some of
Yep.
us if some of the framers of this could say, well, we considered this, this, and this, and we decided this was the best course.
I'll get
But-
that back to Dave Young to be
Right.
sure he covers
But I
that.
think you and Dawn are a great choice to be on the IMA committee, because Dawn, I think, from what I've heard him say, thinks more like I do, and you're in support, so.
I
Yes.
agree. Don and I, that's why when it came up, I pointed at Don because we disagree on some of this.
Right.
If you're going to have a committee have some purpose in life, you should have the people that have difference of opinion on the committee.
But now, I do think if you're coming, it will benefit you to listen to that
Yeah, I
meeting.
will.
I really do. So that I found it helpful. I won't say I agreed with it all,
Yeah.
but I found it helpful to understand the progress of where we were and where we are.
Very
Where
good.
would I find that?
It's, Caleb, that thing from the DHY, I think it's on our water button
It is, okay.
under DHY, or is it under videos?
I'll get back to you on that.
Okay?
No, it is there, Caleb, because that's the one you fixed the link for me. Remember I wrote to you?
Yes, I'm just not sure where it is.
Okay. Pretty sure it is under recently added.
I didn't know if it was,
Definitely under recently.
all right, under recently added on the wastewater button. If you hit that, then you can go to recently added. And I didn't know if you stuck videos there, if you stuck all videos in the bottom. Okay. All right. Anything else? Are we good?
Well, we would want to verify our next meetings.
I did say that before.
Oh, I
Just,
didn't
yeah,
hear.
I did. We did.
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
The next meeting is December 4th, 8:30 here in the Griffin Room.
All right.
We're not meeting on Thanksgiving.
And we're posted for Thursday night, so
Madam
we're
Chair,
covered.
I'd
Yes.
like to propose that we adjourn.
And I'd like to second it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good
Adjourned.
meeting, I think. the one we had.